Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Zoomcast. My name is Alan Smyth, and I'm the co-author of a book called Men Fight For Me. And with me, joining me right now, as always, is the incredible, the legendary Jessica Midkiff. Jessica, how are you doing?
Good. How about you, Alan?
I'm doing good. This is a fun little thing that we are doing. We're making a little Zoomcast, and I think we created the word Zoomcast. Think of it like a podcast, but it's over Zoom, Zoomcast. And we're doing one for each chapter in the book that we've been working on for a while now. And they've been really fun. I can hardly wait till we're all done. Today, we have a very special guest. Do you want to talk a little bit about the special guest that we have joining us?
Yeah, so we have an amazing woman that has been doing this work of helping others in commercial sexual exploitation and many other different realms. And she's just amazing. She runs her own agency that helps others that are in the life and getting out of the life. She's been doing it for years. She's also an author, and she's just amazing. And she just spreads the word in helping others no matter where they are in their life. And she speaks to them in such a wonderful way. And I just love this lady. I've known her for some years, and her name is Harmony. And I can't wait to get her on.
That's phenomenal. And here she comes. There's Harmony right there. We are officially recording this incredible Zoomcast. Now, Harmony, real quick, I don't know, have you ever heard the term Zoomcast before?
No, I have not.
I think Jessica and I may have created this. Think of it like a podcast, if you will, and but it's over Zoom. So we're calling you a Zoomcast.
I love it. Yeah.
And as you know, podcast. Yeah, as you know, Harmony, we've been working on this book called Men Fight For Me. And the idea is it's aimed at men, and we'll talk more about that later. But thank you for being so generous and willing to contribute and participate with us. We're very grateful for that. And before we get into the topic, we want to hear a little bit more about you for the viewing audience. Now, Jessica and I think you're a legend. But there may be people that are watching this that maybe aren't as familiar. So you founded an organization called Treasures.
Yeah.
Also a little bit about Treasures and what you do and how you do it and why you do it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations to both of you. I am so excited for you. I know that this has been so much work, and I believe it's going to be very powerful. You have managed to bring in some of my very favorite people in the world to be a part of it. So people are just going to be, I think, really touched and encouraged. Mm-hmm. So I'm the founder of an organization called Treasures, and essentially we empower women to overcome exploitation and trafficking and give them the tools and resources that they need to live healthy and flourishing lives. We do that through outreach, through a number of care programs that we have available, support groups and mentoring, and then also are very passionate about training other people and equipping them to do this work in their communities.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. And also along the way, let me do a little book plug. Harmony, you wrote this book, Scars and Stilettos. You mentioned earlier it took you 7 years to write it. That's incredible. What a labor of love. Tell us a little bit about this book and what's happening in there.
Yeah. It took 7 years. I had a publishing deal right away, and that fell through when I turned in my first draft because basically they said it sucked. Which was devastating because I thought I really wanted to share my story, to encourage other people. And at the end of that conversation, I was like, is it my writing style? Is it my skill level? Is it the content? And they said, it's all of it, honey. And so I said, what do I do? I have a cat that I think wants to join in. I'm sorry.
Yeah. They're crazy. Cat's invited.
Yeah. And they know how to open doors. So it's like, there's no point in me closing the door. So anyways, so I'm very sorry in advance for this. But so I said, what do I do? She said, I don't know, take a writing class, just start join a writing group, keep writing. And that's what I did. I started taking writing classes with professional writers and really worked to find my voice. And I just realized too, like through the process that the first many 6 years of drafts were really for me because I still needed to process some of that trauma. But at the end of the day, what I was writing wasn't necessarily going to be the thing that would serve the reader the most. And so finally I got to a point where I did the processing I needed to do. And here we are. And there's the book, Scars and Stilettos.
That must have been devastating. Like you're pouring out your life. This is very personal to you. And they're saying it's no good.
Yeah, to be honest, I was like, well, God, I said I was going to write my story. I did it. It didn't work out. I'm done. And I really was about to throw in the towel, but I was like, I can't get off that easy. Like I definitely felt called to share my story in that way. So.
Well, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because when I read this book, the main thing I was blown away with is just how well written it is. And you did such an amazing job telling all the stories. I'm leaning into this each page, and to hear that part of your journey, which I didn't know until right now, that's incredible. So well done. Great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It took time, took work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do recommend anyone to grab this book and pick it up whenever, as soon as you can, and read through it. You'll learn a lot. Okay. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Major League Baseball. I've seen you and Rachel at baseball stadiums in front of crowds. Like, what's going on with that?
That's just honestly, like, I got invited to this cat. I'm so sorry. I got invited to a roundtable discussion about how to like really ethically engage survivor leadership in the anti-trafficking movement, because there were Deidre Pujols and her husband Albert really wanted to do that well, which I had so much respect for. And then after we were like consulting and doing all that, they were like, hey, why don't you come and be a part of these events? So I was like, great. Just it kind of fell into my lap. So
Okay.
very, very thankful for the opportunity. And I love that they're using, their platform to find a way to fight trafficking.
Well, and part of this book, near the end, when we start talking about possible solutions that would be helpful, I actually mentioned that, and I mentioned you guys doing that, and I'm sort of challenging, okay, NFL, where are you? Okay, NBA, let's go.
Right.
You're up next. To get that kind of platform behind this issue would be powerful.
Yeah, totally. So powerful. It's so powerful. And yeah, I love what they're doing. So I'm honored to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Jessica, you had an interaction with Harmony, with Treasures way back when. Tell us a little bit about that and your experience there.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of like fangirling of so, because like Harmony plays a really big role, and she played a really big role in my life a long time ago and didn't even know it, right? And we kind of ended up meeting in the work later on down the line. And I just remembered, when I was dancing, and it was actually the last club I danced at. Harmony's folks came on in, Harmony and her folks, I guess they went around to strip clubs back in the day. We didn't know about that.
Still doing, yeah.
And I remember seeing them and not feeling judged, just kind of like curious, but not feeling judged, not feeling put down like, oh, like, why are you here? You need to stop dancing. It's a sin, or it's an abomination, or which a lot of people do that. And they think that's the way to go about helping people in these types of situations. But they came in with, you're important, you're loved, you're cherished. Hey, if you want help or you need resources whenever, like, here's a bag. And, there were a whole bunch of like smell goods, and like, I think there was chapstick. I have these earrings. They're packed up with my jewelry. I have the earrings that I received from Treasures years ago. I'm kind of telling my age now. And I just remembered like feeling cherished and feeling loved, and, being at that club, like, I started thinking about, after getting the message and it just being so positive and non-judgmental, was like, I have a child, and how do I want my child to see me as she's growing up? Like, what do I want to put out there? And so, when the message was given to me, it really helped me in transitioning out of that part of my life. And, just moving on and being the best person I could be. And I always say, whenever I talk to people, you never know what a person may be going through. And it only takes one kind word, one kind act to kind of change the direction of someone's life. And so, Harmony, you're really kind of like a part of that big reason for me transitioning fully out of the life. So it's like, I thank you and I appreciate you. And I guess God knew that like I needed somebody positive in my life at that point. So with my child and having the great message and not being judged, which so many survivors are afraid of, coming out of the life, it was literally kind of like this turning point for me. So I really appreciate you. A long time ago, I was technically like one of your clients unofficially, and now we're peers and colleagues. So
I love it. I love it. You know what, honestly, Jessica, first of all, I'm a huge fan of yours. I love you. You are an inspiration to me, for real, for real. And I also need to tell you like that. So backing up, you know, we were at juvie together, not like at juvie together, but like as leaders, we were at juvie together. And I remember just thinking like, wow, this powerhouse, look at this woman, like she's incredible. I don't even think I knew you were a survivor at that point. Someone just said, oh, you need to meet her because you guys remind me of each other, which is a compliment. And then after we're in this meeting together, you came up and shared that story with me. And I need to tell you that that has remained a source of inspiration to me for so many years. Because whenever I think about like, and you know, this work is hard, like, let's not try to front, like, let's just be real. It's hard, right? And whenever I'm like, is this making a difference? Like, are these seeds that are being sown, do they matter? And I think about your story and I think about meeting you and having no idea that we had this impact in your life, and look at who you've become. It's so inspiring to me. And the other thing is, like, from the beginning of starting Treasures, my prayer always was that the women we reach tonight on this strip club outreach or on whatever outreach we're trying to do, that they would be future leaders in the movement. That has been my prayer since the first night. And that you are standing here today. Look at you writing books. Like, come on. It's seriously, I have such a special place in my heart for you. And I thank you for sharing that, because it keeps me going.
You're here in my heart because I respect you and everything you do, and being able to meet you, the person that played a really big part in my life. It just, I feel like it all came together. It was anointed, it was blessed, and this is like where we were supposed to be. Yeah. And it's, you know, I will love you forever. So, so, because I look up to you. You're one of my like sheroes. Seriously.
Well, I'm in both of your fan clubs. I'm in the cheering section for both of you guys. That's really fun. I didn't realize you guys had all of that going on below the surface. That's phenomenal. Let's get on to the main subject matter of this particular Zoomcast.
Yeah.
We have the book organized in 3 sections. First section is called Setting the Stage. And Jessica and our mutual friend Rachel Thomas share their stories and some of my story coming into the work. And then section 3 is Conclusions and Solutions. But section 2, the middle of the book, kind of the meat of the book, I call it the big 3. And we take a look, one chapter on the buyers, who they are, what's going on, the victims, those that are being exploited, what's happening there, and then the traffickers. And so today we're going to talk about the traffickers. And I sort of think of myself years ago, like as kind of being in the target audience of this book. Like, I wasn't a bad guy. I didn't know anything about all this. I wasn't going so far as buying, people and buying sex. I wasn't down there, but I was clearly unaware, and I'm sure I was contributing in some knowing or unknowing small way to this whole exploitive culture. And so that's kind of like maybe 80% of all guys, but maybe that's wrong, are kind of in that space. They just don't know. They don't know what's happening. So in this part of the book, we're breaking down kind of the key components of what's happening out there. The big 3, the traffickers. So let's talk a little bit, kind of a open discussion a little bit. I have a few questions and a few prompts that I'll keep us moving on, but just maybe high level, like, my first question, and this chapter in the book is like, who are these guys? I know there's some women that are involved as well, but who are these traffickers? Like, what's going on? Where are they? Who are they? Like, a lot of people have an image of something they've seen in the movies. Some guy with a cane and a fur coat and a hat with a feather in it and driving a low Cadillac. I mean, just, kind of that sort of stereotype of the pimp. It's almost a cartoon, a caricature of it. So who are they? What do they look like? What are they doing? What are they actually doing? What is a trafficker? Who is he? The floor is open. Harmony, let's start with you. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I think you're totally right. I think, and even those, media portrayals, I think really were part of what prevented me from seeing my exploitation for so long, because you know, it didn't necessarily fit that stereotype at all. For me, my exploiter was a kid that I met in my neighborhood that I had known since I was 11. We had a very complicated relationship. He was in some ways like a brother to me, like an older brother, but then he ended up living with us because he, you know, was in and out of foster care. And I would say that's one thing, is that, you know, a lot of what I see is people who end up, you know, in this life have a history of trauma themselves. However, one of the very powerful things for me was this truth, is that my abuser's trauma doesn't justify the abuse. And actually, that's one of the things that kept me staying for so long, is as much as his relationship with me was exploitative, my relationship with him was very codependent. And emotionally, I felt this desire to rescue him or prove to him that I'm the one person on the earth he could trust, and that I wasn't going to be like all the other people that had hurt him or left him or abandoned him, and that I was going to be like ride or die in it to the end, and last woman standing. And after all these other girls, he gets done with them. Like, you know, so that really played into it, that I did see his trauma and see his history and related to it and wanted, you know, to be by his side through it. So that was one of the things that really lended itself to the kind of trauma bond that we had together. But at the same time, like, it happened so, I don't, for lack of better words, organically, the exploitation folded over time. This is something I don't talk about as much, but it didn't start with sexual exploitation. It started with him getting me to commit crimes, you know, and taking that money and just up to no good in other kind of ways. And then it morphed into sexual exploitation. And for him, he came from, you know, a family where there were pimps and drug dealers in his family. And, you know, so anyways, that I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I'm just kind of sharing my experience. So I saw him as my boyfriend, and I saw us as, you know, it's us against the world. And I didn't think of him as a pimp until towards the end. And he started using me to recruit other women I was exploited out of strip clubs. And he started using me to recruit other women out of the clubs. And I just saw him as cheating on me. And then then it took a while for me to see, like, oh, we're all giving you our money, and you're not a boyfriend. You're my pimp. And I finally towards the end had that understanding, that revelation.
And Harmony, if I'm remembering correctly from the book early on, you start your book, that is, Scars and Stilettos. You had some real tangible needs. I think your mom was on a trip somewhere, extended time, and he was like feeding you and bringing food and like helping you survive, and that physically, right?
Right. So that was the other interesting, that really was a big part of what got me in the trauma bond with him as well, is that when my mom left us for one summer when I was 13, he was there, he was buying us food. He was making me, I lived in Venice, which is not how it is now. It was back in the day where there was a huge gang rivalry between the two gangs in my neighborhood, gunshots every night, like watch people killed in front of my eyes, like so much violence. So when he said, I got your back and I'm going to protect you, that meant something to me.
Right.
And of course, not having a parent around to do that. So it was that summer that I became very, very attached to him, and really developed this core belief as a 13-year-old child that my survival depended on him, and I wouldn't be able to survive without him. Like, when I say that belief was embedded in my core, I'm telling you, like, it was the driving force behind everything I did. So it was a very complicated relationship, and now I can look back and see that he had intentions of exploiting me, but I didn't see at the time.
That was my next question, Harmony. Do you think from the very beginning his intentions were to do what it ended up being, or did it just organically morph into what it was for him as well?
I think it was both and that's another thing that really prevented me from seeing my own victimization for a long time as well, because he grew into an exploiter. I think there was this part of him that wanted to not do things the way his family had done, and the way he was the youngest of a lot of siblings, well, the way his older siblings had done. So there was, I saw his wrestle with who he wanted to be. And he was only, 4 years older than me, if I'm not mistaken. So it was both. It was organic. And then also I could look back and point back and see times where, like, I remember one time I was sitting on a bus stop and he was like, I could sell you. And I was like, what? I think I was 14. And he's like, I could sell you if I wanted to. Every person driving by here, and it was Lincoln Boulevard, which is a track in Venice. And he's like, every person driving by is looking at you and I could sell you. And then he just started, anybody got a nickel? Anybody got a nickel? But from that point, every once in a while, he would just look at me and be like, anybody got a nickel? And I knew what that meant. It was just constantly reinforcing this idea that I was a commodity. I was a product that could be sold. And it just was a matter of time before that actually happened and came to fruition.
That's like, so I love how you break it down. Like, you're so great with how you can basically paint the picture where everybody can get it. And I love how you basically said, like, it whatever they've gone through, it doesn't justify them doing what they do to others, and not verbatim, right?
Right.
And so you even explaining the situation of like what was needed on your part as a child, and already having a relationship with this person previously since you were younger than 13 and 14, and knowing too that he wanted to be different from what he had grown up in and seen, but still kind of coming to that point of, oh wow, I can sell you. I can, you know what I mean? And it's like, we understand that you're a victim of your circumstances, but it doesn't make it right when you cross that line over to, basically exploiting or using or abusing others.
Right.
And so, and like, that's a huge part of exploitation. We see so many traffickers where it's like, we understand your circumstances. What is the turning point, or what's the clicking point where you feel as though it's okay to, victimize others to take
Right.
care of self, right?
Because there's so much generational trauma as well. There's so many generational cycles, and it's like, that's what makes it hard too. I think when you paint this cartoon version of a pimp or any kind of abuser at all, people who commit, sexual abuse, pedophiles, that sort of thing, and you just only pitch them as this, like, lurking in the shadows demon, but they're humans too with their own trauma, and that's what also makes it complicated. And yet I want to say, my abuser's trauma doesn't justify my abuse. My abuser's trauma doesn't justify my abuse. But when you say, like, who are the pimps and exploiters, the truth is, a lot of times they come from the same kind of poverty, trauma, abuse, foster care that the survivors and victims come from.
Jess, what would you add to the question that Harmony already began her answer? What would you add to that in terms of who are these traffickers and what are they doing it? Why are they doing it? How would you enhance that?
So it's because Harmony said it just so well, right? And so just even kind of adding on to that, even going back to where we see the exploiter as the caricature, right? And so, I mean, if you make anything into a cartoon or something that can kind of be a joke, it's always more acceptable to the masses. It's kind of like grooming and spoon feeding the masses to be okay with what's to come. And exploitation is not okay. And so me remembering too, with the old exploiters in like the era that they were coming up from back in the day, they did wear the big fat flashy suits and have the cane and have the Rolls Royce, different colors and, green and gold or burgundy, something loud, right? But it's like the exploiter's physical look, it transitions with the times, right? So they look like whatever that kind of like cool crowd is going to be, or what that trendy crowd is going to be. But it doesn't really take away the ugly interior, right? The ugly being, like Harmony said, coming from a really hard background, lack of resources, foster care, no real family rooting or emotional rooting, because again too, like Harmony said, he was kind of like a kid too, right? He was a kid too. He was an older kid, but he was a kid too. So it's like knowing, like, he's putting the pieces together and victimizing someone that's way younger, and nobody's stopping him and saying, no, that's wrong. You know what I mean? And so, like, I feel for the what brought him to the point, but I don't have any sympathy or empathy when you cross the line to become a perpetrator.
Right.
And so, like, and exploiters come in many different ways, just like pedophiles. It's like, children are more likely to be, attacked or abused or molested by someone that's in the family or close to the family, as opposed to a stranger. And it's kind of like the same rule for exploitation. Exploiters are picking from their own backyards most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. So if I see you within a 2-block radius, or you're my next door neighbor and I'm going through whatever I'm going through, it's going to be easier for me to pull you in because I already have a rapport or relationship with you. So the first time I hit you, it's just going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, and we have this bond. So more than likely, she's not going to say something, or he's not going to say something that's being, abused or exploited. And so, I mean, we can go really deep into it. We know that there are certain situations that set a person up, but a lot of times they're just picking from their own backyards, or they're looking, it's easier for them to victimize someone that looks like them or lives close to them, or they have that relationship with.
Like access, proximity, that kind of thing. And at the same time, this digital age has created a different kind of access with social media online, with so many young girls getting recruited that way and targeted that way, because that is a different kind of access, but it's still access.
Yeah.
Harmony, you said an interesting word earlier, that he was like a boyfriend, or was your boyfriend. And, we've just seen that over and over again in our work with Saving Innocence and working with all minors. And I don't know what the number is, but it's a high percentage where these girls think that this is their boyfriend, and that he loves her and she loves him, and they don't even understand that they're being trafficked, because the manipulation and the brainwashing has got to the place where, what do you mean? Why would I say anything bad against my boyfriend? He's the only one, like you said, he's the only one. He's got my back.
Right.
Jessica, have you found that to be true in all your work with girls? I mean, because I know there's a percentage that would be more like a father figure, like an older person that's going to masquerade in some way, but mostly it's a boyfriend. Is that right?
Most of the time it's a boyfriend, but the thing is, what people don't understand in Harmony, you can, like jump in. But it's so people think, okay, like we've identified the exploiters as gorilla, peer recruitment, madam, boyfriend, CEO, manager, where we've identified them in their own categories. But we do understand too that the gorilla could be the CEO and can be the boyfriend all at the same time. And so it's really the same thing too, where the grooming process is like, I'm your man, I'm your daddy, I'm your, your best friend, I'm your protector. It's a combination of things. And so it does cause a lot of confusion, especially for someone so young. And I could say, probably almost every kid that I've worked with, my own personal experience, it's going to be like those, like the fake, deep family ties, right? Anything where I can pull you and keep you where I need to keep you and do what I need to do with you, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And so like, I'm your friend, I'm your father, I'm your protector, I'm your daddy, it's everything.
God. Sometimes they're like, I'm your God. Yeah. That's such a good point. And I think the categories are so helpful because they help us understand, they can help us identify the strategies exploiters use. And I love categories, and it helps our brains kind of wrap themselves around all of this. But the truth is, you're right, it can be very complex, and it's not one thing, it's many things, which is why it does become so, there's such an entanglement and such an enmeshment, and it becomes so difficult to leave, because like you said, they're not just filling one role. Oftentimes they're filling many different roles. So very, very good point.
It's just with, just really identifying that, because also too, I've run into so many people where they would be like, well, what kind of pimp is he? Mm-hmm. Exactly what was and it's like just putting out there, and it's not just one thing. There's not just one kind of trauma. There's not just one kind of trauma that fits one kid and all kids or all people. It's really complex. And that, that's where the daddy comes from. It's like, bitch, call me daddy, right? I'm your daddy, I'm here. And even like you said, I'm your God. And I'm pretty sure you know about this, where the pimps will say, there's the pimp God and the hoe fairy, mm-hmm. right? And so they would be like, pray for forgiveness to the pimp God and make sure that the whole fairy carries you through this. Like, it's a whole brainwashing, nonstop situation, So I'm just happy you brought in like the God aspect too.
Yeah. But I do think that the boyfriend piece is, like at the end of the day, we all just want to be loved, right? And so I do think that that's a common one that we see, because that is a point of extreme vulnerability for a lot of young girls, especially who are coming from, they don't have their family of origin or broken family of origin, fatherlessness, just that missing piece, that hole. I know for me, that was an easy thing for him to kind of slip in and meet that need in order to exploit it. So that's definitely one we see.
Yeah.
Harmony, Jessica said something one time that made my blood boil. And it actually made itself into the book, into this chapter. And relative to the manipulation and all this stuff that's going on, Jessica told me, and I don't want to misquote you, Jess, but you can expand if you want, but something to the effect of that what can happen, does happen, is that as the trafficker, the boyfriend, is having this moment of intimacy with this girl that he's exploiting and trafficking, they'll be bonding at this deep physical intimate level, and then at just the right time he's been known to whisper something in her ear that says, if you ever leave me, I'll kill you. And some sort of statement that all wrapped up in this love, in this intimacy, is this not so subtle threat that she's never allowed to leave. And it actually just made my blood boil when I heard that. I was bothered for days. Something that's created and supposed to be bonding and loving and pure is twisted upside down into manipulative and ugly and dark. And I was just curious, you can share whatever you want to share, but is that something like that? Have you experienced something like that from that early boyfriend, where he would stir up in a pot of stew a mixture of love, intimacy, and threat and force all at the same time?
I was getting so nervous when you were like, what made your blood boil? Yeah, that story actually brought up some PTSD visuals, not in a bad way. I'm cool, but from a family member, a story that I'm just not even gonna share because it's too traumatizing. So yes. But yeah, I think that's definitely part of it, because, when you look at a trauma bond, there's a few different elements that exist that make a trauma bond. And one of them is that the abuse is sporadic in nature, and that it's not constant abuse. It's interspersed with these moments that are bonding and intimacy and filling the tank and building up. And then there's the tearing down, and then there's the abuse, and then there's the depleting, and all of that. So, which is similar to what you see in the domestic violence, cycle of violence as well. So I think that is an example. That's an example of both of those things happening in the same moment, which is very dark and twisted. But even if those things are not happening simultaneously in the same moment, that is the cycle. That's the exact cycle right there in one moment, encapsulated,
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. So frustrating. At some point, I'll be interested to hear what you thought I was going to say.
No, I didn't have a thought. I was just getting nervous about my own blood boiling over whatever it was.
I'm not trying to make any of your blood boil.
I was anticipating. Yeah.
Okay. So as part of this exploration into the big three and traffickers, at some point, I said to a friend, I said, hey, any chance a current or former trafficker that I could meet with? And sure enough, there was a guy that was a former trafficker, and he's now out doing his best to do on the good side of things. And I sent him a note, and he responded immediately. And we met in Orange County at a coffee place. And here I am sitting down with a former trafficker. I was so interested to okay, what's your perspective? I got a whole lot from Jessica and Ori and other people that I'm learning about that side. What's the actual trafficker thinking? And he said a few things, and it's all in the book again. And kind of my interview, I was challenged with a few things that he said. And so I'd love to just chat about a couple of them right here and get your guys' take. One of the most fascinating things was I sat down. I mean, we're just sitting down. And the first thing that comes out of a little bit of small talk, a little bit of, oh, thanks for coming, whatever. And right off the bat, he says, I'm not evil, nor was I when I was in the game. I just needed to survive. And I thought, that's fascinating. I wasn't coming to the meeting with any malice. I didn't know the guy. I knew that he was out trying to do good stuff. I certainly don't like what he did in his former life, but that wasn't one of the questions that I had. And I thought to myself, wow, he wasn't even required to say that. And he led with that. And I just thought, that'd be interesting. I'd love your take, Harmony. I know you're a woman of faith. What do you think when you hear a former trafficker say, I'm not evil, nor was I when I was in the game? And I'll say this, when I was driving home from Orange County, I called my pastor and I think I left a voicemail. But my thought was, okay, this is an interesting theological question. Can someone who's not evil do evil things? Or do you have to be evil to do evil things? Or like, what's that mixture of all of that? I was just challenged with it. Do you have any thoughts on that by any chance?
Oh, I wish I had read your questions so I could have. I was like, I want to be surprised. I'm not going to read the question. I'm like, I wish I had time to think about this because I'm an internal processor. Okay, I'm just going to shoot from the hip here. I actually do tend to be of the mindset of really recognizing the humanity and brokenness in people, and that, at the end of the day, every party involved in trafficking, the buyer, the trafficker, the victim / survivor, we're all dealing with our own sets of brokenness and pain and operating out of that pain. And so I would tend to agree that I actually don't. Maybe there are a couple examples of people where I'm like, this would challenge my philosophy on this, but I do tend to think that that evil isn't necessarily inherent to a person, but it's brokenness, our brokenness, that causes us to behave in ways that are evil, and the behaviors are evil.
Yeah.
But I do also believe that the restoration and healing that is available to anyone with any trauma and brokenness is available to everyone, buyers, exploiters, all survivors, obviously. And I do think that we, in general, as a culture, we don't like gray. We like black and white. Gray makes us uncomfortable. We like seeing victims and perpetrators, and but at the same time, that makes it difficult because, like when we're talking about young girls who are genuinely in their experiences, they're in love with these traffickers, and if we just, see them as all bad and evil, then we're also not understanding like all the complexity that would lead a person to feel like they do love this person, because they're not one faceted. There is goodness, I believe, in every human. And that is part of why I stayed with my exploiter, because I saw the good in him. I saw who he could be. Yeah. Right. At the same time, I think, there is a certain level of, like I said, trauma often in the background of those who become exploiters. But I just need to also keep saying that my abuser's trauma does not justify the abuse, because we have to be careful not to tip in to like, well, everybody's a victim here. The buyers are victims, the traffickers are victims. Like, no, there are certain people in these equations that are doing the perpetrating and that are doing the victimizing. Yeah. And there are victims. So, but it's also, there's a lot of gray too.
Sure.
Because humans are very complicated.
They are. And he finished that sentence with, I needed to survive. And he went on to talk about his early childhood. And you guys talked around this a few minutes ago. He said the same conditions that produce, the victims and the buyers produce the traffickers. And he talked about being homeless at 12 years old and having no dad and having a drug addicted mom and sleeping in a car. And he needed to sell drugs in order to buy food and all the stuff he saw in his neighborhood. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I would have expected that. That's not surprise me. But the path, the only thing that he saw in the neighborhood from his older brother and friends was a certain particular lifestyle. And I'm not trying to excuse anything that he or they do, because, they make choices. But a light bulb definitely went on for me a little bit in that conversation.
My exploiter always used to say, and part of this was the trying to convince me, but the other part of it is probably true. He'd always say, if I was a woman, I'd do it. And so, yeah, but it is super complicated.
No, it really is, because like like you said, human beings are really complex and they're really hard. And so there is no black and white really, with my belief, and it's changed over time, because at one point I was just like, F pimps, I don't care, and it was the own growth and the own hurt and the own, not understanding on my end. But as like moving forward and looking deeper, it's yes, at one point you were a victim of your circumstances, whatever that may be. But when you cross the line, because there is a fine line, when you cross the line to start victimizing others, they say hurt people hurt people. So, it's the same concept. You still could have made a choice, and it may not have been the best choice. You may have still been really messed up. So it's understanding that. But it's like, once you cross the line, you have to be accountable at this point.
Right. You've made a choice. There's still like, yeah, there's still choice. There's still agency. You weren't, probably in most cases, nobody was holding a gun to our exploiters' heads, right?
Like they say for us.
Right.
But
there's a lot of there's so much complexity. And then on the buyer side too, like some of the research around people that struggle with sexual addiction and buyers included in that is that they have extraordinarily high rates of sexual abuse in their histories as well. So now, does that excuse them at all? No, but that it does help us. It doesn't excuse it, but it helps us understand. And I know for me too, the more I've been able to understand the humanity, look at really the complexity, embrace the fact that it's not black and white, and also forgive my abusers and my perpetrators and the people that victimized me. It's just made me healthier, as a person.
Let go of that anger.
Even like, I always say like there's different levels of like constant forgiving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like you have to constantly try to figure out how to forgive. And like, it's the same too, where we've seen, those that were victims that turned into perpetrators. I wasn't far behind from that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where I was on that cusp of becoming a perpetrator myself. You know what I mean? And at that point, say if I would have been caught up and I'm doing the same things that the exploiters are doing, I would have to be accountable for that.
Right.
And so it's not like, oh, we're just blaming you straight out and you're the devil and you're horrible. But it's, you have to still kind of, you got to be responsible and accountable. You have to kind of hold it.
Right.
And instead of like exploiters just sitting in jail, I've always thought, well, what about the services that they can get? Where's the healing for that? You know what I mean? Because I do believe that exploiters being exploiters, they can change too. It's not just limited to us that are victimized, or we've been put through whatever. It's all of us, and their healing may look a little different. It's like with we've had these conversations where it's, people were like, oh, the kids are just being trafficked and it's CSEC and that's their trauma. And really, if you look at it, it's about this much of the trauma because what took place beforehand. Yeah. And so the exploiter kind of picked up where that grooming kind of left off.
Right.
And then we're left afterward with trying to cope and understand what has happened to us. Not saying that the human trafficking, the CSEC, all that stuff is not, a huge part, but with the precursors, it's probably a bit smaller, right? Because in most cases, the trauma doesn't just pick up when you're exploited.
Right.
There are things that have happened before.
Right. It's a history of trauma that led us to be more vulnerable to being further traumatized by exploitation.
Right. And it's the same thing for the exploiters, like hearing about the exploiters where they're seeing friends getting killed, where there is a parentless household, where they are in foster care, which foster care is hell for the kids that we serve, right? For a lot of different reasons, just all these different things, being hungry. And now we're in the age, like you said, of social media and stuff like that, where kids want to be like their peers. They want to keep up. So the nice cars, the nice clothes, the nice everything, it's another opening for an exploiter to come in and say, hey, I can get this for you. But it's something that a kid is just trying to survive. But where is it where you stop being the victim and you become the perpetrator?
Right.
Accountable. But we need to see some rehabilitative services. We need to see, I'm happy we're doing the book because it's calling men out on different levels. Hey, stand up and talk to your sons. Hey, stand up and talk to your nephews. If you see a young lady going through something, say something kind, like how your organization did for me, and so many other young ladies and women. It's just those moments, I think, that human beings forget to have. And so it's not saying it's okay that you victimize so many people. We're just going to give you a slap on the hand and go on about your life. No, you have to pay for your part in what you do. But why not walk through this with you? Why not? Let's help support you, but we're not going to condone your nonsense.
Right.
I don't know if that's too harsh, but.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I do want to say something too, because you brought up the point of like, you were probably this close to also becoming a perpetrator. So that does bring up the point of, you know, what is sometimes referred to as forced recruiters, where those that have been victimized end up flipping over and becoming recruiters and exploiting other people themselves. But, and that's so complicated too, because on one hand, like you said, you know, maybe there is a certain level of agency and choice in that. But on the other hand, this is someone who has been brainwashed. And one of the ways, you know, one of our survival mechanisms, this always stood out to me in domestic violence. They talk about alignment, and that some children in domestic violence households learn that the best way to survive is to align with the abuser, because that is where the power is and that's where their safety is. So, and when I think about trafficking, if you align yourself with the exploiter and also become an exploiter, it's also a survival tactic, right? Because it makes you feel maybe a little safer than, you know, all the ones that are just freshly being exploited. So listen, I don't know if this is helping people, because maybe people don't want to know how complex it is, but this is reality. You know, it is so complex, right?
Yeah. But if we know better, we'll do better. You know what I mean? Yeah, so let's keep popping bubbles. Let's burst them all, you know?
Right. Okay, let me give you one more.
Can I say one more thing?
Oh, yeah.
That's the other thing. People want to come in with hero, victim, rescuer, victim. And it's just, come on, it's not so black and white.
Yeah.
And I have a whole nother thing about the rescuer language and mentality in the movement, but we'll save that for another webcast. Zoomcast.
I want to be on that because I already, yes.
Okay, all right. I got to get a word in edgewise. You guys are phenomenal. You guys are great. I want to unpack briefly one more of the things that challenged me when I was sitting down with this man. And we have the conversation in the book, and in the book is where I bring in you, Harmony, and this quote that I've heard you say a couple different times. But he talked a little bit about his little phrase was by choice, not force. And I pushed back hard. I said, what do you mean no force? He said, well, I know that has happened. It just wasn't with me. And he kind of explained his experiences. Okay, whatever. But he talked about willingness, and his perspective was, far more girls are willingly doing this than are sort of believed or understood. And I sort of like pushed back. I said, okay, wait a minute, this complexity that we're talking about right now, willingness, they're choosing to do it. And Harmony, that's where I bring in the thing that you've said on a number of occasions. I remember when I was writing it, I sent you an email. Is this what you said? You said, that's pretty close. Here, here's what it is. And you said something along the lines of, I'll let you say it, but what did you say? What's the words?
What is choice without options?
What is choice without options? And most of these girls or women do want to get out and do something else, but they don't see any other options. And so what is choice when you can have a cell phone or a cell phone? Which one do you want? I'll take the cell phone. Like there's no choice. I'll take that. So unpack that just a little bit. How'd you come up to say that? Why do you say that?
Yeah. Well, where that initially came from for me, the work of Dr. Melissa Farley, they did research across, I believe it was 9 countries, and they found that 89% of women in the commercial sex industry want to leave, but don't see any other options. They did that study in prostitution, and they also did it in stripping as well. And the number was the same. And so that just led me to this thought of like, what is choice without options? If that is your only option, that is not choice, right? And then the other thing for me, and again, this really prevented me from seeing my own victimization for a long time, is that my exploiter, he was very high IQ, and he knew that he couldn't just come at me like, you're doing this, period, right? Like, he would take me through, I don't know, well, what do you think? What do you want to do? It's up to you. But at the end of the day, it would be like, well, I don't see how else we're going to make money. I don't see how else we're going to, or, and there was, but he kept with me, he kept this illusion of choice, but there was also this intimidation and threat in a relationship where I was afraid of him. And there were just all these other dynamics that it was like, at the end of the day, I knew I really didn't have a choice, but he always kind of dangled this illusion of choice for me. Yeah. And again, that's one reason why it was hard for a long time to see my own victimization.
Yeah. No, that's
by choice and not force. That's explaining what that is. So in so many ways, it's still, I'm pushing you to say what I want you to say, but I'm going to make you believe that you made your own. And you put that so well. Like, yeah. I've never heard anyone just break it down that way. Mm-hmm. And that's really exactly what it is for those that say that they're not forcing. You know, it's just the way that they present it, you know. Right. Like you said, he was functioning on a high IQ. Yeah. So he knew how to like break that down and manipulate the situation with a child. You know. So yeah.
Master manipulator. Like, yeah, so intelligent.
Of someone who's unprepared to operate at that level cognitively and emotionally and intellectually, oftentimes as a young child. And then the last challenge I had with him was really just with me as I'm driving home from Orange County. I was like, okay, I got to deal with this because I've used the word evil before. You know, I don't even want to say the things that I would be thinking that I'd like to do to these traffickers. But now he's got a name and a face and a story and a trauma of his own. It's like, okay, there's way more here than what's on the surface for most of these traffickers. Again,
I want to tap into that a little bit more too, because any of us who have, you know, been given the label survivor or survivor leader, right? We can look, and again, because we are complex, and many of us who have experienced sexual trauma and abuse deal with a lot of shame as well. So we can look back at our own trajectory and story, and someone might be calling us a victim or calling us a survivor, and we might have all these reasons why we don't feel like we were victimized or feel like it could have been our fault or see the mistakes we made or whatever. Like, and so if we try to make people black and white too, like that it's all black and white and it's one or the other, you're a victim or not, or you're bad or you're good, then it makes it more difficult for us to access healing for our own complexity and have self-forgiveness and work through the shame that we have. If you see what I'm saying, is if it's so polarized in that way. I'm not sure if that's making sense. I'm just like, I think everyone needs to know that healing is available to all of us, and that we all, you know, the survivors may have also done things that we need to have forgiveness for ourselves for and overcome shame about. And so the messaging is so good guy, bad guy, and we don't see ourselves as the good guy, then how are we going to get the healing that we need? Because we kind of see ourselves as the bad guy too. Does that make sense? It
totally does. Yeah. It's just, again, the word that's coming out in my mind is complexity. This is every part of this, every angle is more complex than meets the eye. And you're speaking to that well. Okay, there's two more quick questions here that before we kind of wrap up. And I thought, okay, now that some time has passed for both of you, you've gotten on with your life and doing some amazing things. If you had the ability to hit send on a button or a mass text or something and send a communication to all the traffickers, not just yours, but all traffickers, what would you want to tell them? Like, what don't they know? What don't they understand?
Questions.
Question?
I sent them to you 3 days ago, Harmony. You chose not to read them.
Not to. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, it's such a loaded question because it can go so many different ways, right? And so, I mean, speaking to all, you know, all exploiters, and I don't think that all exploiters, everyone is created equally. I just don't, just like every, you know, survivor of commercial sexual exploitation, we're not all created equally, meaning like the trauma may be different, and, you know, our stories may be different, and certain things may be different, circumstances, how we react or respond, and, you know. But with exploiters, especially those young ones, and they're coming up under the older ones, is like, you have options. You know, go to somebody that's trusted, right? Go to, if you got, where I grew up, a lot of us grew up with our grandparents, right? go to grandpa, go to uncle, go to somebody that may be healthy. You know, they might have a favorite teacher. I've heard a number of exploiters talk about they had that one good teacher, or they had that one good person, or maybe I should have, or, you know, like encouraging them to reach out to those that can kind of protect them, right? Um, do I think that all exploiters are evil? No, but I do know that there are some that are just out there just to do what they do and they don't care who they hurt for whatever reason. I do believe that there are some evil folks out in this world. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think everybody is inherently evil. And so it's just like, you know, speaking to them is there are other options, there are other ways. Be accountable for your actions the best way you can, even if it hasn't been taught to you. You can feel there's like a moral compass within you. And you can feel when you're actually harming someone. I know I felt it when I've recruited. I know I've felt it when I've had to be aggressive or abuse one of my wife-in-laws, or, you know what I mean? You know, but it's just like that, being accountable, reach out, seek answers. A lot of these dudes are really, really smart. Seek what you're trying to find. You know, and understanding that people that you may have come from victimization, but understanding when you cross that line that we are victims too of our circumstances. So don't aid in victimizing and harming in whatever it may be, another life. You know, I feel like it takes one good thing to say or one good action to change a person's life. But I also feel like it takes that one damning moment as well to kind of change the path of someone's life too.
I think that's a good word, because everything that I've learned, which is a tip of the iceberg of what you guys know, is that, and our friend, the trafficker that's in the book, is like, he didn't see any other options. So what is choice without options, right, Harmony? He didn't see any other options. And so you would like to tell all these traffickers, you have options. You don't have to do this. You could do something else. That's really great.
Yeah.
Harmony, how about you?
More options.
Okay. That's so good. Thank you for sharing that. So here's what I would want to say is that this is not what you were put on this earth for. And there is a better plan for you. You can do better.
Beautiful. So much potential. You can bring so much healing and so much goodness with the strength and the power and the intellect that you have. And you've chosen this other path for whatever reason. You have options, and this is not what you were meant to do.
Well, there it is. I think the three of us together could draft something just really nice.
I think we just did.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap this up. This has been phenomenal. Really fun to be with both of you in this way. Harmony, I've been watching you on doing these things. You're in front of your Zoom or camera all the time, putting out amazing things. Now to actually I'm doing it with you. It's really fun, just for me personally. So thank you.
Great.
Okay, the last thing I just want to hear you guys say, why is this book important? You both signed on to it. You both said yes quickly. And Harmony, I don't know if you remember this. Well, you wouldn't know this, what I'm going to say. But in all those all-stars, those favorite people in the world, I sent that initial email out, and you were all on there. Rebecca Bender, Rachel Thomas, Nola, you. Certainly Jessica was on there. And we said, we're doing this book. And we want to write a chapter called More Than a Survivor. Not that you're telling all the nitty gritty. You guys have all done that, but talk a little bit about your life after life. And you were the first one to respond. You said, it's a yes for me. And I thought, oh, that's awesome. She's immediately in. I love that. And so why is this book important? And when I say this book, really what I mean is an important conversation aimed at men. What would you say? Why did you say yes so quickly? And why are you here on this Zoomcast? And why is this important?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important because, you know, at the end of the day, and I say this all the time, it's a supply and demand issue. If there were no demand, there would be no supply. There would be no need for women and girls to be exploited, and boys and men as well. And so men, unfortunately, do make up a large part of the demand, especially for prostitution. When you start talking about porn, women are now, you know, 1/3 of all users of porn are female, according to the most recent research I heard. But men have such an important role to play. My husband often says, you know, they've been a part of the problem. They need to be a part of the solution. And we can do all of the recovery, survivor support, outreach, blah, 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 all that till we're blue in the face. But if we don't do anything to reduce demand, and one of the ways being by educating people who are participating in the demand, then it's not going to matter, because the demand does what it promises. It demands supply by any means necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's well said. Jess, you want to add anything to that? Why is this important?
Harmony hits the nail on the head every time. I just have to say that. So seriously, but just even to add on to that, it's just, you know, kind of bringing men and young men and men in general just back to being the true protector, being the, you know, the one to be there through the thick and, you know, thick and thin, and the respect and the love, because even piggybacking on Harmony a little bit, just the overall sexual objectification of women and girls in general, right? And men do play a very huge part of that. And just showing like what the respect and the love and the honesty and the everything, you know, this book, I feel like is covering it. It's, I think, the only one of its kind. And somebody has to say something. It has to start somewhere. And I just really believe in the project. A lot of us, girls and boys, anybody being victimized, needs someone to fight for them and to be their champion. And so, you know, with Harmony even saying too, that education, it's like, well, let's get on the preventative side first. But because I mean, we're right in the middle of, you know, everybody being entrenched, but let's start catching people ahead of time as well. You know, so I mean, it's just really important. It hits home for me. It hits very close to my heart. And I had a couple of men in my life that did fight for me the best they could, right? But just really having like that community of strong men to stand up and say, no, not you. No, not your neighbor, not, you know what I mean? It's just like, I think it's a part of, or a start of, on another level of healing humanity.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just believe in it. Harmony, you killed it.
Yeah.
Oh, you too. I just love you, and I've loved doing this with you and hearing from you. And I feel like, you know, I can sit here and do a little talk on whatever, but being able to vibe like this and hear from you and get ideas and dig, it's been great. I've so appreciated it.
We got to keep this going.
Yeah.
I love it.
So, I love you.
Thank you, Harmony. And it meant a lot to me personally, because I don't have all that history that you and Jessica have together. And so it meant a lot to me personally that you quickly responded to be in this book and be part of this process. And you and all those other all-stars that you mentioned. I'm just honored that you would trust me and Jess, but me with, you know, part of your story and your input. So thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure.
This book is available. We've created a little website. I don't know if you've seen it yet, Harmony, fightforme.net. And we're going to be posting a blog. We're posting these Zoomcast videos. There is a page, a resources page, and we've linked treasures on there. And for anyone who's watching this, Harmony is a self-described, would you call yourself a stat geek or a data geek or something like that?
Stat geek, data geek, all of it. I'm all the geeks.
I've looked at your website a number of times when I was looking for a little information and a little stat or a number on something. You've got a number of things posted there. So that's a particular niche that you excel at. And
we have a whole comprehensive stat guide. Did you see that?
I have seen that. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. So go
to
IamAtreasure.org. Is that what it is? I get it right?
IamAtreasure.com. IamAtreasure.com. And yeah, right at the top, you can download the free stat guide.
Free stat guide.
Awesome.
And so fightforme.net is where this whole project will live, and the book will be available there to purchase it, and other resources, and keep the conversation alive. We're going to focus everybody, but particularly men, into this conversation, because men are the problem, which also means we're the solution, or a big part of it. And so that's what we're doing here. Thanks again.
Thank you guys. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys.
Thank you. Love you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.